Welcome to the Infinite Star Connections podcast. We are super excited to be with all of you all around the world. And we are your hosts, Jeff Demers, myself, Viviane Chauvet. As you know, we are both ambassador for our beautiful cosmic interstellar delegations. But today we're going to take a deep dive through the stars to the universe and back to the ground on the earth with the one and only Mary Rodwell. And even though Mary needs absolutely no introduction, her presence, her work speak for itself. Allow me to introduce you to Mary and her incredible accomplishment. Mary Rodwell is the founder and principal of Australian Close Encounter Resource Network, known as ACERN. She was born in the United Kingdom and eventually migrated to Western Australia in 1991, when she currently resides in Queensland. Mary is a former nurse, midwife, and health educator and was employed as a professional counselor for the National Health Service, UK, and Australian Counselling Agency. Since 1994, Mary has worked in private practice as a professional counselor, hypnotherapist, metaphysical teacher, researcher, author, Reiki Master, and international speaker. Mary has spoken as many conferences around the world, and her credentials are very impressive. She is the author of many phenomenal books on research, Australian leading researcher in the UFO and Contact phenomenal. She wrote Awakening, How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life, and A New Human Awakening to Our Cosmic Heritage. She also has CDs for relaxing meditations and countless also um, energy and research and, of course, sessions with the Star Children. I am particularly excited to explore this topic further with you, Mary. Welcome back to our podcast today.
Thank you, Vian. It's absolute pleasure, and I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with you again. It's always wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, you are most welcome. And to read a few words from our audience, it is what a treat. Indeed, we are blessed to have you. Mary, it's been a while since you've been with us. I know so much has changed, not only in your work, probably your research experiences, what you've learned. Let's begin here, especially with the changes in consciousness, planetary movement, change in the electromagnetic field of Gaia, and the planet herself moving and shifting in new direction. What would you like? What would you say that has been a most profound common change that you've seen or heard about, whether it's with the Star Children or through your work?
That's a really good question. And there's two things that I've noticed more than anything in the last few years. First of all, the exponential increase in people waking up to more of who they are, waking up to contact with non-human intelligences. And that has been exponential, literally in the last 2, 3, 4 years against previously, although 2012 was quite dramatic for a lot of people and quite a catalyst. Certainly in the last few years, there has been this dramatic rise where, those contacting me now, there are, numbers are so far greater than they ever were. That in itself has been really interesting. Some that have had experiences as a child all through their lives that have never really wanted to explore them until it's like, I've got to do it now. I've got to understand now. It's like there's been this kind of catalyst with this energy that's saying, now's the time. Now's the time for me to find out. And that is the theme that I'm finding with a lot of the older generations of those having experiences. But the interesting thing too is not only wanting to connect the dots to experiences they may have had as a child or growing up or whatever, those anomalies and paranormal, they would call them, and this kind of experience and whatever. What I found was that with that, became this shift in their awareness to becoming more multidimensional at the same time. So these are the things that have happened, and maybe missing time episodes or whatever. I want to know about what that was, what happened, why me, who is it, what do they want of me, what is my purpose, all those kind of big questions. But noticing that some want to go into a trance state to find that out, whereas others are having experiences where they're trying to manage these new abilities or new awareness that they're experiencing, like seeing orbs of light or feeling presences around them or getting downloads of information, and healers saying, I'm getting this language coming through me, and wanting to know how to manage that. How do I deal with this new part of my experience? Because it's not something you can go to the nearest psychologist or doctor and say, well, actually, I get, dreams where they're telling me the future, or, this kind of thing, because they know still we live in an environment, in certainly mainstream environment, where these things are considered suspect still in terms of your psychological health. So they're extremely wary to tell me, but at the same time, that's what they're wanting help with often, is how do I understand this? How do I work with it safely, with balance? And, is it okay? So that's where my work has certainly shifted into helping people to have confidence and be grounded with these abilities that they're starting to experience. And the main thing is getting reassurance that they're okay, that there's nothing wrong with them.
That is a really very powerful point you're making, and I love to see how the nature of your work has shifted in that way as well. Would you say, based on your experience, Mary, that there may be a little bit more an acceptance about this experience, whether it's new form of languages coming through, whether it's a being coming from a multidimensional timeline or a future aspect of ourselves? Would you say that it started to become more accepted, either by those who are experiencing those encounters, but I would say overall, even on a conscious level?
Vivian, I think that's absolutely true. There is more and more out there from universities and academia that are looking at consciousness. What is consciousness? And because there have been so many very credible sources of people that have had experiences like out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, healing experiences, whether they perceived energies or beings or whatever, those having shamanic experiences as well. There's a whole range of out of our normal consciousness that people are experiencing now, and it is starting to be taken seriously. I mean, you could say that, and I'm going on a bit of a segue here to those that may be interested in the fact that autistic children now are being investigated for having abilities for telepathy, and there's the telepathy tapes that have come out where autistic children now are showing that they're telepathic. Well, that's been something that I've been exploring in the New Human for many years, is that what we see as a dysfunction is often not a dysfunction, but an ability that's not understood in mainstream. And this is the fact that something like the telepathy tapes have taken the internet by storm, shows that people are actually ready for it. The problem has been that many people haven't spoken about their experiences, primarily because they're afraid of some kind of discrimination or judgment from people that actually don't understand its tangibility and its reality.
Indeed, I am aware of those the psychic tapes that's coming up more, and I think it helps you to redefine our perspective, even on the medical level, with a psychological level, and even to ourselves. We're starting to change our perspective of how we can see that the potential that we hold, the human race as a potential. But all of these children have been labeled and put on the drugs to really numb them. They come with faculties. Would you say, based on your experience working with them and even their families, would you say that many of them come maybe from other, either star systems or galaxies or other part of the multiverses, that these faculties are natural, and when they come here, they may not be as adapted to think, functions, speak, or behave the way that it is demanded of them, or expected of them.
Absolutely. And usually they very careful who they pick to incarnate with. For example, a 10-year-old told me that he was a blue being. This was his first incarnation, and he was a center seed connecting to the center of this planet to help with the pollution, but was very keen to tell me that his parent, his mother, had many lifetimes here, so she could help him adapt to being human. I spoke to a 7-year-old young girl who told me she was a hybrid, that she was part blue avian, part human, and that she brought in the healing abilities, which she said, which was fascinating, through language and frequency. And she said that when she activates someone, they then can activate their own healing. So she had this profound understanding of how everything works. And these are the ones coming in fully awake, fully aware of their mission, fully aware of what is actually going on the planet, and also being assisted, because many people say, well, it's one thing being assisted by humans that understand, but also assisted by their star family. And this young 7-year-old was saying, yes, her family, the blue avians come and visit her and take her back to her planet occasionally and whatever. So there is a program that is multidimensional, galactic, interstellar, interdimensional, that is actually going on all these levels as well, which we don't realize. I had a lovely chat to a young 9-year-old that is explaining that he goes home to his planet at some times, and he also works with different interdimensionals, and that he goes out of body sometimes, and he monitors others that are having these experiences in case they need help. So you've got this extraordinary awareness that's coming from what we think is just children, who are actually amazingly amazing, what's the word that I can use, avatars of light that are coming into this planet, and coming in extraordinary numbers, I believe now.
Mary, do you think that children can have more than one conscience at the same time?
More than one consciousness, do you mean, Jeff?
Just having another conscience, like a shared consciousness.
Yes, there could be various things that could be. One of them is that they ultimately agree to have another aspect of themselves coming in, whether or not you call that higher self or another aspect of their soul self. Because I think from my research, it seems that we can be in various places in different aspects of ourself, so that we can actually experience parallel realities, other dimensions, and an aspect of ourselves can do that, so that we're not just the one aspect here, that we can be multiple aspects experiencing all things at the same time. And I think we sometimes tap into that when we think we're dreaming or whatever, but we're actually visiting maybe or interacting with other aspects of ourselves. That's one. But I do think if we've got soul connections to other intelligences, sometimes they can come in and operate with us with agreement. So I call that overshadowing, but it's allowing the other souls. Sorry, I've lost my voice a little bit just then.
Reset. Take your time, Mary.
The overshadowing is where their consciousness can be moved aside slightly, and the other intelligence can come through and deliver information if it's appropriate and it's part of a soul agreement on another level. But I think there's probably many other ways that we can have a shared consciousness. I know that I remember a young lady telling me that when she was taken up onto the craft, sometimes her physical body was laying on the couch having a siesta, and there was a consciousness in there keeping an eye on it while she was up on the craft in her consciousness, and was keeping an eye on the body by being there and guarding it, if you like, from other intelligences. So there's so many things that we're learning, understanding about what is consciousness, what are we, and how are we actually operating as in our essence, in our spiritual soul, or 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 in terms of our greater understanding of who and what we are, or oversoul. Some use the term
Yeah, the
oversoul.
oversoul. Yeah, I mean, the Zetas talk about superpositioning too, where you can experience the same thing someplace else while you're here.
Yeah,
And I think that's what you're describing too.
I think all the things that we think are impossible, I think are possible, very likely possible. It's
Mhm.
just that we haven't yet come to an understanding of how possible things are. And because we're programmed into limits on this planet, right from the word go, it's very hard for us then to accept there may be other things, other ways that we can operate. And we're only just discovering the possibilities. I mean, like remote viewing, for example, where
Yeah,
you can go to other timelines and see different things. That would have been, as a child, that would have been to me quite impossible, given the age I am now. But people are doing it all the time. We've got children now and adults being taught how to see without their physical eyes. I've seen this for myself, where
yeah,
they're able to see with their consciousness. They don't, and their eyes are blindfolded, and yet they can operate perfectly well without, but they're being assisted to deprogram themselves from thinking they need physical eyes to actually perceive what's around them. We haven't even begun to, I think, understand our potential. And I think that's what's so exciting, because we're starting to see that now, not only with the children, but with the adults that are waking up and being activated.
yeah. It's starting to become mainstream now. That
Mm.
wide interest of that, which I agree 100%.
Indeed, I think the human potential is simply resurfacing right now. And one of the things that not only through my Octarian group, but other intergalactic, spiritually advanced group are saying is that we need to really free ourselves from the illusion of time when we are very much slave to time, linear time, where the past, present, future. And I know that I talked about this many times, and it's just that it's allowing ourselves from the enslavement of the limitation, whether it's put on our DNA, our consciousness, our brain functions. I think we're at that point where we are rediscovering what the true potential of humanity is about. I'm sure, is that something that is explored through your work?
Well, I can give you an example of how I came to sort of understand that even more, is when I've worked with those that maybe have a missing time episode, and they want to know what happened when they were 5 or 6 or 7, when they had that missing time, or had an experience where they feel they were taken up onto a craft. So what I've been able to do is say, okay, we can go back to that experience, and I take them to rediscovering what actually happened. They may be aware they were being taken up onto a spacecraft by 2 or 3 different intelligences or beings. They may see themselves having a procedure done and different beings around. And the questions then is, I can say to them, is any of those intelligences or those beings familiar to you? And generally they'll say yes. There's always one that's familiar, because generally that's not the first time they've been picked up. And then I'll say to them, ask that being, how many times have you been picked up? And they'll reel off the ages. And then I'll say, what other questions have you got? Because what I will ask when they come to me for a session, what do you want to know? And they'll say, well, I want to know why me? Have I agreed to it? What is going on? Why are they doing all those kind of questions? They can then have in real time a conversation asking those questions without intelligence in hypnosis, even though it might have been when they were 10 or 15 or whatever, but it makes no difference. They can have that conversation in that space at this present time. Now, how does that work? I think because there is no time,
Mhm.
that it is, so they can have that, and they have a wonderful conversation. They can find out all sorts of things about why their connection to the whatever intelligence it is. What is that connection? Have they on any level consented? And many of them say yes before I came here. They'll find out what their mandate is, and they'll ask, why did you do this? What procedure are you doing now? Oh, we're giving you a checkup or whatever. One of the fascinating ones for me was when one lady said to me in the space, she said, they're taking my consciousness so that they can operate on my brain. So she was aware she'd gone somewhere else in her consciousness, and they were working on brain. So she said to me, don't talk to me for the moment, because I'm off somewhere, somewhere wonderful. And she didn't want me to interfere with that. So I'm sitting there really quietly waiting for the okay to get back into the conversation. And then she says, I'm back now into my body. And I said, well, you've got all these questions. And she said, none of them are important. After she'd been taken with a consciousness somewhere, none of them were important. And I found that quite fascinating, that somehow all the knowing that she needed was obviously there after that. And that was it. So that's, there are so many amazing things that people experience. But unfortunately, it's still not out there in mainstream for people. I meet so many, Vivian, particularly, that feel isolated and alone with their experiences because they are so extraordinary in mainstream. Mainstream would look at that and think that's extraordinary. But to them, it's every day, or it's every week, or it's every month, or it's every year. And they say, who do I talk to? Nobody will understand. My family just think I'm crazy, or the family gets scared. My friends don't want to talk about it because it's too strange. So the biggest thing that they suffer with primarily is isolation, because they think it's just them, and that maybe there's something wrong with them after all. And that's why, the truth embargo has been so damaging, because we're not talking just about thousands or millions here. We're talking about billions of people that are having experiences that feel totally isolated, thinking it's just them, because it's still not okay in mainstream to say this is my experience.
Okay, now I want to go back to when you were talking to your children. Are they all from Australia?
Oh no, I talk to parents and children all over the world, as long as they can speak English.
Okay.
So a lot in US, Europe, UK, particularly, some in South America, some
Okay, now, when they talk about being visited and seeing beings and stuff, have you found that a certain demographic is favored to one type of being? Like, let me give you an example. Like, I always, from what I could gather and study on, it seems like the United States and like Australia and the Southern Hemisphere primarily is all Zeta types. And over in Europe, it is more the human figure, and like the tall whites and stuff like that. And over in Asia, it is a really small Zetas. But it all depends on the part of the world,
Yeah. What we did with the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation when we did our survey beyond UFOs, which was 4,200 people, 600 questions. The one that came up as the most seen was the humanoids or and energy beings. Secondly was the Greys, the Zetas, and what have you. So everyone thinks it's the Zetas. No, it isn't. It's often, the humanoids or the energy beings. So that's out of 4,200. And that in itself, I think, gives us a pretty good idea. I think what they do, though, is I think different intelligences will bring up screens if they think someone isn't quite ready to see them in their true form. For example, it might be a screen that they see when in fact it's a mantis being that might show themselves ultimately. One of the things that we talk about is screen memories, where someone is maybe very fearful of clowns and saying, I've had this real fear of clowns right from a small child. And actually that is often a screen for a Zeta. And I remember once doing a regression with a young man, and he didn't even know he was having experiences at the time. And he said, I'm seeing this clown with, the funny little shoes that the clowns wear. And I knew then to ask him, I said, I want you to look again. And as he looked again, there was the gray feet,
right,
with the 4 digits and whatever. So I knew it was actually a gray. But Santa Claus is another one they use.
Mm-hmm.
Big
Yeah.
eyes is another one. Skeletons is another one. So if they're not sure that you're ready to see them in their true form, they will put something there that they think you'll be more familiar with or more comfortable with. So being aware that when they say this, some will say, I see an owl outside the window. And I'm going, nah, that's not an owl.
No.
Yeah.
Not an
That
owl.
actually happened to a friend of mine too. Is that when he was abducted, he got up and there was a militarist type person, so it would calm him down so they could explain to him what happened to him. So but yeah, they do take on the form that you are the most comfortable with.
Mhm.
The interesting thing for me is when somebody's connecting not only to their higher self, but maybe to their guide or their gatekeeper or that life spirit that supports them through their lives. And it's quite interesting because many of them think they're going to see someone like a North American Indian or a Tibetan monk or something. And then they'll say, I'm seeing blue feet. And there's only 4 digits. Right. Okay. And it surprises them sometimes that what the intelligence that's supporting them is not human. That is, in fact, another form, which gives it a great deal of actual accuracy and tangibility, because I say to them, do you think in your wildest dreams you would have imagined it being a blue being? And they said, not in a million years would I have expected it to be a blue being. So they're introducing us to many, many different forms to get us ready to be part of this galactic community. And I know, Vivian, you agree with that. They're getting us to stop discriminating to different forms and realizing, in essence, we're all spirit. We just take on different forms.
Yeah,
It-
education and understanding.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a really, really good, really powerful point that diffuse ourselves and releasing ourselves from fear of fearing anything else that looks different other than a human. Now, just to define a few semantics here, would you describe for us what does it mean a humanoid being versus a light being?
Only the fact that with some we're talking about frequency with the interdimensionals really will often just show you a form that is like light. They don't need to actually embody a physical body, whereas a humanoid is embodying some kind of physicality of some kind. That's how I understand it. And some can choose to be just light, or they can choose to embody a form if they think that that's going to be more helpful in their interaction with you. And for me, it's really interesting because it's showing us really the different frequencies of depending on what we understand as dimensions, which are just different frequencies. Just like some people can see spirits and some people can't. It depends on the visual spectrum of that particular individual, because we are very limited in what we can see as actual physical, something actually physical. So we're talking, let me put it this way, in the way that I've come to understand it, at least, is we've got the physical intelligences, interdimensional, extradimensional, transdimensional, ultradimensional, and also visitors from our future, which I remember a 7-year-old telling me that he was from our future and that he's come back to operate in this time. And so that takes us again with what is time. Because it really makes a joke of what we think is time, because we don't actually really understand. But it's a way of trying to understand our reality. I think that's what it is. It gives us a kind of map to
A
understand.
measuring stick. Yeah.
It's a point of reference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if you look at this multitude of timeline that coexists at different variation, different octaves, or different frequency. So when we say we're coming back in your time, we can associate ourselves and it become a point of reference. So you mentioning also, Mary, and I agree with you in terms of ultradimensional being extra-dimensional, interstellar, all of these differences that you meant, multidimensional. What is really much the difference between an ultra-dimensional versus an interdimensional versus an intergalactic? According to your knowledge and your expertise and your experience, what is the difference between all of this?
As much as I can understand it, because I'm not somebody who understands physics at all, so I keep everything pretty simple in terms of my own way of understanding. What I think the dimensional side is still frequencies that are more tangible to us, if you like, whereas the they are beyond dimensions. They are in a completely different, what's the
State,
word?
a different state.
State.
Yeah.
Yes. They're in a different state completely, where it's not dimensional at all. They're beyond the dimensions. They're not working, because I see the dimensions as more as a physical reality. They're all still in a way tangible and physical, because they're different frequencies within a certain state of dimensions which keep going. And I believe we're told there's 11 dimensions, or there's 21 dimensions. I've heard it's infinite in terms of dimensions. So, but I think that beyond that is more that we are not aware of. What we call them, maybe ultradimensionals. The reason I use that was, I remember a 9-year-old explaining to me about God, and she said that's where God, the angels, and the souls live, is in this ultradimensional place of light, was the way that she put it, and that we incarnate in different densities right the way through it in terms of tangible realities, and we're all helping each other move through those densities back towards the light, was the way that she understood the soul journey. Very simple, but in a way it sort of made sense to me, because it sort of fits with my simplistic understanding of how it works, that we're all here helping each other grow towards the light through our soul experience and our understanding of what is beautiful, loving, and what else can I say? Compassionate.
Do you get repeated children coming to you with more stuff?
I go with what happens with the parents and their issues. Often it's very pragmatic issues, in the sense that my child is struggling at a school. Often that's the
Hmm.
big one, because they're usually very empathic, they're healers, very sensitive to energies and what have you. And often they can be picked on at school. So they can often be bullied, or they don't see the relevance of what they're being taught. I remember one 13-year-old telling me that when she's at school and the teacher's saying something that's inaccurate, she has her guide right next to her telling her what to listen to and what not to listen to, when the teacher's not actually being accurate or whatever. What the parents are saying is, how can I help my child retain their integrity with this kind of uh, environment, which is really for them very primitive, and very challenging for them, since they can be so tapped into um, the multi-dimensional aspect of everyone around them. To give you an example of that, I was talking to a young man who was he was 16 at the time, and he told me that when he was about 11, he was operating multidimensionally. Everything made sense that way. And he said, but his family started to nag him and say, can't you just be normal? Stop saying all this weird stuff and just get into being real. And he said, Mary, I tried it. I tried it for a short time. He said, and I was so depressed that I wanted to end my life, and I nearly did. And I thought, well, the only way not to end my life is go back to being multidimensional, where I can make sense of things. So he said, I went back to being how I was. It was the only way it made sense. He said, but the trouble is, going to school, I was aware of everyone's issues, everyone's trauma, everyone's feelings and emotions. And it was overwhelming. He said, it was really difficult. And this is what the parents say to me: my child is not thriving at this school. They don't handle it. They get bullied. They don't seem to be able to relate to the information. And so many of them end up saying, well, what are the options? And there's very few places they can go other than being homeschooled. So it's practical stuff often that the parents are talking to me about, is how can I bring this beautiful soul up on this planet with the least negative interference possible, so they can be all they've come here to be. And that seems to be the issue. And that's where I think we need to completely revamp the way that we bring up our children.
And it warms my heart to hear that, because all these advanced souls who come from multiple aspects in the multiverses and different octaves of evolution. They come here and they're this structural aspect of the linear 3D matrix reality confine you to says you have to compress yourself in that box, and then if you know, behave, speak, or learn a certain way, then you identify as an outcast, or something is wrong with you, something needs to be addressed, cure, healed, or taking into control or under control. So it's re-understanding how you're helping the parents, the soul who have agreed to bring these advanced souls into this plane of reality here, and bringing them in a support, in a safe environment where they can receive the support and the true guidance they need, as opposed to be boxed in and put under labels or drugs. So it really speaks to me because as a child I was labeled a great deal, as you can imagine. So I am very sensitive to that. There's a question for you, Mary, in the chat room. Can I read a question to you?
Yes.
Thank you. So Patricia is asking, she said, Mary, do you see or speak to children who bring in geometry, for example, the diamond or the tetrahedron shape?
Well, I've spoken to a number of children as well as adults anyway that are bringing in different symbols and different forms as the way that what's interesting is some individuals are actually seeing that multidimensionally, are seeing the geometric forms of light and what have you, and they're bringing those forms in, which I believe are programs or energy or codes that are coming in. And it's happening more and more, that those kind of geometric forms are coming in, all different kinds, and the energy that's coming with them. And children, I've got 2 slides of a long time ago now of 2 4-year-olds, and one was a 5-year-old writing symbols across their arm and saying to their parent, this is important, you must look at it, this is important. So they were aware in some way that they needed to convey that information to the parent. The fact that we don't fully yet tap into what that means, I think, is just simply we haven't got the software yet to actually decode it. But I think that's all part of our DNA that's going to be activated to assist us when the time comes.
Indeed, I couldn't agree more. There is a reawakening, a re-emergence right in the original DNA template in the quantum field of the DNA that we're going to allow generations of old souls, star
Mm,
seeds, and star children of all ages to start to understand that these natural abilities, whether it's decoding ancient language or light language or different form of advanced geometric patterns,
mm.
fluctuations, frequencies, and so forth, will become more accepted, mainstream, and becoming very natural, to be honest, very organic, very natural. And and I thought I'm really happy that you're mentioning that. I can see that.
I think, Vivian, the important thing to say to people is that the more you open up, more will open up for you. It's like one of those things, the more you become least fearful of what's actually happening and accepting, the more information will come in. And I am seeing it time and time again where people are sitting quietly, going into a quiet, meditative state and finding that they're wanting to put down symbols or codes or strange scripts or whatever, and saying, well, what is this? But it feels good when I bring it in, but not fully understanding. And I think they have multiple uses. Some of them are activators. Some of them, I think, are doorways. I think some of them are actually information programs that are going to be available when you're ready to access them. And also, I think, assisting with this whole um, our population being activated. So in other words, they're in your energy system, that you become a kind of hard drive of frequency, which actually assists others around you that can tap into that as well. So it's almost like it's being those frequencies can be available to others around you that are ready to take on those frequencies. So you become a kind of portal yourself
Mm.
to information.
Okay, now here's a email question I had before you got here. Um, this guy Gary wants to know: is there any type of food you can eat to help your um, um, growth as a conscience or telepathy? What type of nutrition would you recommend?
Oh, um, I would say that if you trust your own intuition, your own knowing about what actually feels right to you is probably the best way to go, because we're all different and we've all got
Mm,
different biological systems that operate in different ways depending on what we've been exposed to, for example, and whatever. So what works for one may not work for somebody else. I think just holding something and feeling into that. Does this feel right? Does this feel good for me? And just honoring that is one way to do it. Some people may use dowsing, or they may use, different things like that to see if that's good for them or not. But I think there's a part of you that knows when you're eating something, whether or not it feels and is good for you. I think this is important for not to put a mandate of anything, because everybody literally has to start taking responsibility for their own choice of food and what they're taking in.
Mm. Thank you so much for this. I would say very opening answers because it brings self sovereignty and discernment and higher intelligence. And I know eventually the body template is shifting so much, the vibrations, the body become a more clearer conduit for frequencies. And that is if we're allowing that to happen rather than resisting out of fear, they will also change the relationship to food, I would say. So, and nutrients.
Yeah.
mhm,
I think, Vivian, for me, the most overriding message that I have for those that I work with is self-empowerment is about you trusting you came in with all the skills you need to get through this life, but you've been disempowered by being told that you're not good enough, or you can't make decisions. Everyone else knows more than you, or you need a piece of paper to say you're great, or whatever. And that's in fact taken away your sovereignty of self and your own ability to be your own teacher, your own student. It's all there. You have it in the package that you are. It's just
Yes.
reminding them to actually start having confidence and trusting it again, because that's all we've got at the end of the day is ourselves. We can't put the responsibility to someone else and say, well, they told me this and now it's not right, or they told me that, or whatever. No, you have a choice to choose to allow that resonance of yourself to the information, say, does that feel right for me? Because we are all different and we're all in different situations, and what's right for one may not be right for another. So you can't make a blanket statement about anything because you don't know.
It's a really good point as well, and it's ironic because I had earlier today, for me today meaning Sunday morning, I had a gathering, an online gathering with members of my Octern University and Universal community, and we were talking. I made a comment about I always question about others dictating this is the recipe to stay healthy. And I've said, prove it to me, show me to me. If I want to be able to eat something and I
Mm.
feel a great calling. And I mentioned something similar. So we're very grand mind think alike. I just want to bring a sparkle of smile, Mary. So thank you so much for your wonderful answer. Um, there's a wonderful question from our friend David. David was on the Infinite Star Connection podcast not too long ago. And David is asking you a question, Mary, so allow me to read it for you. It
Mm.
says, are you finding that these children are opening up new cognitive programs and, in a way, sharing them to and for those that would listen?
Well, I think the fact that we're finding that children can actually see without physical sight is one way of showing us what we can do. And now there are courses for adults to actually learn the same awareness and what have you. The fact that we're finally learning that autistic children can communicate telepathically. And I've met a number of parents of autistic children that say to me, we talk telepathically to one another. I think what the children are doing is highlighting our potential. We're just the older models, that's all. And so the older models have to be reminded that they can do this too, because we all have that potential. It's like those that think that someone who's psychic or intuitive is unusual or special, when in fact we all are. We all have that ability. It doesn't matter who you are or what you think about yourself. The fact is, it's belief that stops you doing it. Whether, if you don't think you can or you're not good enough, then you're actually creating your own limits. This is about knowing we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what we're capable of. But these children, thankfully, are showing us on multiple levels what is possible. And that's why it's so important, I think, to hear them and to listen to them. When you have a 9-year-old telling you that she can change the water that is polluted or what have you with her consciousness, with her mind, what's that telling you? The same thing that Masaru Emoto was showing with water. It's all about frequency. It's all about intent, the right frequency, whether it's a prayer or it's a song or it's a symbol. We all have the power to do that. It's all there in front of you. But taking responsibility for that and actually owning it takes a lot of confidence. And that's really what needs to happen now, is for people to start believing in themselves, because we don't even begin yet to know what we're capable of. And I think it's going to be quite miraculous when we do.
This is what we
Okay, now
call
I
a
have
great
another.
reawakening.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
I have another off question. I'm dying to ask you. Okay, now it's 2025. Okay, I believe we're going to have actual physical contact before the year is out. Probably, my estimation, by late summer. Okay,
Yeah.
early fall-ish. I mean, when I say that, I mean an actual recognized uh, being. Okay,
Yeah.
so let's fast forward a year from now. Where do you see the state of it all after that happens? I mean, is it do you see people like freaking out more, or do you see more of, are we ready to accept them and understand what is going on?
I think, and it's a good question, Jeff, and it's one that I've thought about a lot, is at this moment in time, if that happened, or even in a year's time, in the state of the consciousness of the planet now, I think it would be very, very disturbing
Hmm.
for huge populations. But I believe there is another program that's going to help with that. And I think that it's almost like, I feel that many of those that are creating the bridges, just like yourself and Vivian are doing, there's a protocol that we've got, and others will have as well, that when that happens, that will be activated to enable us to assist those that are still struggling. We'll have a kind of format to follow, which will help those that are still struggling with that reality. So we'll be guided, I think, into what we need to do to help those that are struggling with the reality of all of it. But I think they'll also be activated into more of an awareness and acceptance. It's a bit like those that suddenly realize that they're having experiences and they're having to come to accept that it's real and what have you. It's a process that we've all gone through, or some of us younger than others and whatever. We got through it. We survived.
Yeah.
So we're really the precursors to those that we're going to help to do the same thing. We'll use our own experience, our own awareness, and their activated awareness to help them come into line with an understanding and an awareness that this is a new reality of experience and, our galactic history. All of this, I think, will be activated so that there's an understanding. I'll mention a film that I've mentioned a few times, and now it's just gone straight out my head, the actual name of it, and in a minute it'll come to me. But it's a young woman who, and they're blaming the drugs. She's someone who's, in fact, given drugs to the drug mule, if you like. And the truth of it is that she doesn't know until some of these drugs, which are a new kind of drug, start activating her DNA. What's interesting is, as they seep into her, she becomes more and more multidimensional in nature. and starts to see more and more of an expanded reality, we won't need the drugs. I'll tell you the name of it when I can think of it again, because it's a short one and it's gone straight out my head again. They'll let me get it in a minute. But the what it's really saying is we've only got, what is it? We've got 5% of our DNA that they understand. 95% they have not a clue what it actually does. That is going to be, I believe, activated to allow us then to experience things far more multidimensionally. And we'll also have a way of managing it, which I think is the software that's being delivered to us now all over the planet, which is going to enable us to interpret our new reality. It's going to assist us to come and balance and harmonize with that reality. So this is, all these codes coming in, all the languages are all a preparation for this. So we're not just going to suddenly have to say, well, here's a blue being, come to terms with it. We will come to terms with it because we'll understand more of our own links to those particular beings, that we're all part of this wonderful consciousness of intelligence and life and awareness. So we're going to have all of that help because we're going to be able to reach that point ourselves with the frequencies that are coming in and the protocols that we're given. It's all there. When you know that 1 gram of DNA can contain all the information on the internet, 1 gram, just think about what we have in our DNA, the Akashic records. It's all there, who we are, what we are, where we've come from, what we've experienced, what everyone else has experienced. All there.
Yes.
That's how I understand it. So we will just be gradually working through who we actually really are. Just like the kids come in and they know they're from other planets. They're not fazed by it. They're not fussed by it. We just need to be reminded. So for me, that's how it will happen. It won't be.
Okay, now I was told too that the sun's luminosity is so bright now that is what is helping the people get to the higher states that they need to be. Because the sun was yellow decades ago, and now it's white. I mean, you almost can't even stand it out there. And I think, and they were right. They said that that it's what the sun's supposed to do is projects that light so that we all on the planet are getting the upgrades that we need.
It's happening subtly at the moment, fairly subtly, so that we are gradually being readied, if you like, and prepared for that shift. And I think it's going to be really startling for all of us. And I know I've sort of asked and said, come on, guys, give us a heads up, what am I getting prepared for? How is it going to happen or whatever? And they're just saying, you can't conceive, Mary, of actually how it will be. And there's no point in you asking, basically, other than to trust that it will happen, and it will happen and you will understand when the time comes. So I suppose it's readying us, all of us, at this moment in time, for that I don't know, that catalyst, that activation link that's going to change our whole reality. And we will be ready for it because we'll, on a soul level, we'll know what's going on.
Well, I always doubt what they tell me anyway, because you can't trust everything that they say. So I had an app on my phone that I've been using for the past 3 years now, and it measures the luminosity of the sun, and I'll be son of a gun if it hasn't increased, just like they said it would.
That's the wonderful thing is the more you're in touch with yourself, and you obviously are, Jeff, the more you're in touch with that, the more you're tapping into the truth of what's actually going on and able to discern what has integrity in terms of information and what hasn't integrity. And that's what the kids are born with, is this ability to see through and to see where there is truth and where there's not truth. And there's, this is the matrix that makes it so difficult, because who do you believe? They'll have an aspect of the truth, but not all of the truth. So we have to be in charge of ourselves and, give ourselves that resonance to truth. And it's about saying, that's all I accept. I don't want anything other than the absolute. And that's the frequency you're putting out. And that's the frequency then you'll tap into. it's all frequency ultimately, and resonance.
Agreed.
It really is. It really is. So this is why the same thing when we change out of the frequency or the density of fear, anxiety, overthinking, over projecting, we allow ourselves to have the space to co-create different frequency. And that's where the true answers, guidance, and energy really come through. Now, I have a curiosity, a question to explore with you that many people have wondered about. We hear a lot about, oh, I saw a blue being, or this being was blue. What, according to your experience and knowledge of what you have received over the research of many years, what is the deal with the blue beings? Not everybody is blue, obviously, but why so many blue beings? So it seems.
I think I've heard of many different sorts of intelligences that are coming through, and people are seeing them or relating to them. I think there are certain star origins that are more prolific, that are assisting us on this planet right now. And one of the things that I do when I do what I call the spiritual defrag, it's like taking somebody into a space where they can release all the old programs and limits and blocks and whatever, so they can really tap into the integrity of who they are and whatever. One of the things that I ask during that defrag session, if you like, that visualization, is what are the star origins you're most connected to this time on this planet? And many of them quite spontaneously may come up with Arcturus or Pleiadian or Orion or Zeta Reticuli or whatever. Some say other planets, other dimensions and what have you. But I do think there seems to be certain origins of star nations that are particularly interested in supporting Earth during this. And that's why I think many of them may tap into the Arcturian, for example, or the Pleiadian. But they come up probably the most of all of those that I've worked with. But there are many others that say it's you don't know the star system, it's another dimension, or whatever. And some of them are angelic,
Mm-hmm.
as well, which
Yeah.
is really interesting. And a lot are connecting to the dragon energy as well, which I found really quite fascinating. That seems to be another energy that's coming in. But primarily there seems to be the ones that I talk about as the Pleiadian particularly, or the Arcturian or Andromedan, for example, some of the main ones that come through. But I believe, just like I was talking to a wonderful lady called Elsa Dillon, all her children, the girls, every one of her girls draws the beings, and the oldest one, Gigi, has drawn 200 plus beings that she's interacted with. Amazing detail of all these different intelligences. Most of them look very humanoid, but quite distinctly different. And she's just one of many of the star kids, young star adults, should I say now, that are drawing some of these amazing forms of intelligences that they're working with.
Yeah, and there are so many absolutely phenomenal sentient intelligence that coexisting, co-working, interacting with us as us. And so some of them are utilizing also more familiar frequencies that are associated with the planet. So the blue frequency, it's a very familiar
Yeah.
frequency that's also associated with human beings or the human template. And so they're not necessarily all blue, but some of them may project an holographic aspect of themselves as a light body through the frequency. And it's also feeling more familiar, comfortable, diffusing fear, diffusing anxiety, and it relatable because the frequency is very well known by human beings. Um,
Mm.
so I'm glad to see that there's more and more coming through. Um, there's a question from Margaret for you, Mary. In okay, so always answer to what you know, based on what you know. According to your knowledge, are the dragons and the reptilians the same species?
No, they're not, as that I understand. In fact, the dragons seem to have a very positive frequency from what I've heard of those that they'll just say, I've always been interested in dragons, feel very connected to them. And these are people from, I've talked to those in Europe and in other countries that for some reason the dragon energy comes in, which I find quite fascinating and very positive in terms of its energy. We know that with reptilians, they're not all something to fear. There are many reptilians that, from my understanding, that are trying to gain higher consciousness, as well as we are, that are on that timeline as well. That's what I've been told. And I don't see why not. I think that no matter what your species is, we all go through a journey with that, whether we're exploring the dark as well as the light. And ultimately, there's a choice that we make, which leads us into a new understanding of creation and reality or whatever. So I don't think there's any species that are all dark or any species that are all that we can just say it's this or.
I mean, I know some bad humans too, so.
I know exactly. We've not got some really wonderful humans running this planet right now. Let's put it like that. Whether or not they've been influenced or whatever, and I'm sure they have. But the bottom line is we're all on a journey learning about experience and how to operate and grow from that. And that's how I see it. In the end, there's no judgment of that. When I take people through a past life, for example, and they see their death sequence and they come out of it and see themselves just in spirit form. And I'll say to them, so what did you learn in that life? And they may see, I learned about compassion, or I learned about limits or whatever, but I didn't do so well in this one. Next lifetime, I'm going to tackle that a little bit more and create this scenario where I can tackle more of that because I didn't feel like I did it in the way that I wanted to. Not in judgment, but in understanding experience and the adventure of it as a soul. So it's all about, to me, it's all about experiences, not the judgment, just the understanding you want to explore more of a particular theme in your experience as a soul.
Very true. And the celestial being speaks of it as well. It's all about soul evolution. It's all about the experiences that the soul will align itself with. And what is the purpose? What is the lesson learned? What is the wisdom earned? And then always gaining more light and expanding. So it is something we speak a lot on too as well. So it is so much in resonance. The energy is really off the chart because I can feel people are so engaged and loving this flow of conversation. Such a treat to have you with us. And I know we have more time, but I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah.
Yes, and having you here with us, it was wonderful. Jeff, my friend, questions, observation, comments you want to make?
Well, yeah, I want to just throw something at Mary about dragons. Now, so this is my observation. Devil's Tower, okay, and I can show you on the map. I'm sure you're familiar with it. For years we thought it was a tree, okay, but then I started looking at the surrounding landscape, and to me, I could draw out a shape of a dragon that fell down, and what is shown on Devil's Tower is actually his left horn. You can see his face, you can see his hand, his claw, his body, his tail. It's all wrapped around. So that dragon theory is really not too far-fetched.
Jeff, I think absolutely. I mean, the fact we've got in history, all about the dragons and what have you, and why are they such a big part of Chinese culture and what have you? I think that we know so little of the truth of who we are, where we're from, or the history of this planet.
No, I always believed, and it's another stupid theory, but the Ponte showed me how the planet on the Earth, the continents were all one continent, and the Umo even said that they came to this Earth and was mystified by the separation of the continents because they had claimed that most of the bodies that they explore and look at and everything is all one landmass, and this is one of the very few that is separated. And to them, it was very hard to say, well, who was in charge here, because it looks like everybody's in charge, and they had a very hard time figuring out who to contact, because everybody spoke a different language, for one. So they just said, so they settled in Spain, and then they just started learning about the planet from that point on. But if you look at the proximity of China, where the dragon was really, prominent, you could see how it was just a quick jaunt from China to what we call North South Dakota. It wasn't that far of a deal. So I could see that it was how they took that dragon theme and ran with it, because over in the United States, we don't care what the hell a dragon is. It's something that they use in China, but we have no reference of a dragon in a history. But yet there's one laying on the ground in the Northwest. It's just interesting to me. That's all.
Oh, I think that there's so little that we know about our history and our ancient history, and all the giants. Where have they gone? For example,
Exactly.
Right.
They
And
were
we
right
have
across.
bones to prove it, but that they were here.
That's right. It's all there. It's all been hidden from us and whatever. Michael Cremo talks about the hidden history, where iron nails have been found in rock that is several million years old, for example, and this kind of thing. There are so many anomalies that we have no real idea the truth of what our history is. But what I think will happen when we get into the frequency of knowing, all of that, I think, will then be made available.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to understand our true heritage and who.
Yeah, and it is going to be something that we never thought of ever. What we were taught was wrong, but what we were taught is what we knew. Nobody researched this stuff when I was growing up, and they didn't care.
Well, many of us felt, even as children, that all these history books were so out of alignment and fabricated. I never wanted to spend any energy to learn them. And I know that many starseed felt the same way. Mary, did you want to add something? Because there's another beautiful question for you.
Oh, I would like to say that I remember very, very easily when I was at school having to do an exam on history. And it was the same, I think, 18th century to 19th century or whatever. And I'd learnt it by rote, because you do, from 3 different history books. But I was noticing that there were differences in each history book. And I remember being quite irate because I went to the head of history and I said, what am I supposed to write here? They're all giving me different information. So what's the correct one? How can history be so mixed up and inaccurate then when they're all different? And she just said, well, that's, the victors write the history books. And so you're going to get that, Mary. And I thought, well, either it's truth or it isn't truth. And I was quite put out as a 17-year-old that I had to put up with the fact that everyone might have a slightly different perspective, because you're very black and white when you're a teenager. But it was the guy. It said to me was something very significant. Is there's nothing set in stone. That all the stuff is around you resonating ultimately to what is the truth, because it may become something completely different to what you've been told. And that's why I say to people, in your heart when something feels right, and that's what we should be listening to.
That is very true, and also it helps us to get in tune again with our core frequencies, with our truth. And really trusting yourself is also strengthening that relationship to self and all aspect of yourself. What if you already remember from the true version of Atlantis or Lemuria, or you were there in Babylonia, or you were there in ancient Egypt, and now, but because of the program and the overpowering of the 3D logic mind, we bring shadow of doubt. Oh, that's not possible because, the authority, the structures, the programming, the history book, there's some called evidence. I always say, never believe none of it. Just go explore and feel for yourself. I remember as a child sitting in the classroom, looking at a history book open in front of me, and a teacher talking on the board. and conversing, having a telepathic conversation with my Octarian father, and says, Father, I know that all of it is irrelevant. And they said, yes, we know. You understand that too. Just go through it.
Yeah.
What he would say is, memorize it into a temporary memory part of you and going to be erased after that, just to go through the experience so you can understand what human beings are going through. But I would be sitting in a classroom having a discussion with my Octarian father and my delegation to tell them this is rubbish.
Yeah.
This is completely out of alignment. And they were coaching me to how to navigate through this. So it just makes me smile when we talk about that. So, Mary, thank you for sharing your experience as a 17-year-old. I will love it. Our friend David is asking, Mary, have you discovered a powerful field of energy, probably not far away from your house, or maybe an earth energy, naval, something about a powerful mountain nearby you?
Where I am, there's what's known as the town of 1770, which is really not a town at all. It's where Cook landed at the very first time in Queensland. And it's just at the headland, probably about 5 kilometers from where I am, or maybe less than that. And there is a portal there. In fact, there's more than one. And it was called, in our little museum, the Door of Destiny. And I don't even know why it was called the Door of Destiny, but for a while that's what it was called. And that's where a lot of intuitives that live near me actually go there and can feel the energy in the portal there. So there is definitely something very, very significant there, but they've tried to kind of hide it or cover it up. But when you go there, you can actually feel, and someone said to me, there's more than one, which wouldn't surprise me as well. But that's what was interesting. A little aside to that was a gentleman who's no longer with us, sadly, who was an experiencer from New Zealand. And the reason he came to live in Agnes was because he'd been told on the craft when he was in New Zealand that he would live in Australia one day and he'd need to find the Door of Destiny. And he went round Australia 3 times before he finally ended up taking the turn to Agnes Water in 1770. And there was the Door of Destiny, which was like a little structure that was there, and he'd actually found the Door of Destiny. So that means to me there's something very significant. I believe there's a ley line from here to Uluru. And there's
Yes.
been a number of people that have actually experienced that. And one of them, a beautiful spiritual lady that was a good friend, said she meditated once and she found herself, as she was meditating, actually at Uluru. In consciousness had gone to Uluru. So there is something very significant here. And I suspect that's part of the reason I've been drawn here or put here for whatever.
I like that you mentioned that a particular very powerful ley line. Sometimes it can be also on the ground, maybe like
Yeah.
David mentioning in the chat room, an underground giant pyramid of structure. I spent 2 weeks in Uluru less than a year ago. And when you talk about this ley line of connections and very powerful, ancient, interdimensional portal connecting even beyond the earth plane, it was really palpable. And I've seen so much unfolding there for the 2 weeks we spent in Uluru and Katajuta. So it really, I can feel the vibration moving through me as you spoke those words, Mary. So thank you for bringing me back on site and the energy of it. Yes, that is
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. I I am personally curious, and I'm sure many of us will benefit from this curiosity. I am a curious being, as you can see. I love your work with, today the children's, their families, people who are want to understand different aspect of experiences. Is there a more commonality in terms of the messages or the reminders that you may hear through your sessions with people who have experiences, contact, direct communication, children? Would you share a little bit about these common messages, maybe to bring us ray of hope and trust and confidence with the changes on the planet?
Well, I have to remind myself that things are changing for the better ultimately, given the world is in full of chaos at the moment. And reminding myself that I've never been accessed as much as I have been in the last few years, with not just children, but adults and grandparents and older members of society, waking up to the fact that they've got to talk about their experiences, that I've waited all my life and now for some reason I have to start sharing it and whatever. The message seems to be is this is why I came here. This is what it's all about. And I'm here. And I've even said to those that have, in the 70s and 80s in my sort of generation, maybe it's too late for me now. And I said, no, it won't be, because you'll be part of the ones that are bringing in you're the bridges from the old to the new and what have you. So feeling like you don't belong, all the, what I've got a mission, I've got a purpose. My family is somewhere else. It's not here. Don't really understand humans, find them very primitive, all those kinds of feelings of, I hate to say the word alienation, but knowing they're here for a reason and for a purpose and they've got gifts. And the one thing that's been fascinating is how many of them are almost afraid of what they can do. They've said, I'm afraid that if I get into who and what I really am, it may be too powerful. And I'm almost wary about what I could manifest. And that's been very interesting, So all of that suggesting to me, particularly the numbers of children that are coming in now, or, even though they seem as children, they're not. The fact that so many of them are manifesting and being born across the planet right now, and goodness knows what the numbers are. I think they're everywhere. You'll hear a child singing who might be 9 or 10 years old on one of these shows and what have you, and they sound like they're 30 or 40, with voices almost pure and strong, that you think, how can a child of 8 or 9 sing like that? But because they're coming in with that frequency, and that's their way of sharing that frequency. And we're saying, what a beautiful voice. We don't realize it's a frequency that they're bringing in, and they're in some kind of music show or whatever. The geniuses that are coming in, that are showing their abilities and what have you, that's the tangibility of the change. That's the reality of the change. These children aren't coming in for a waste of time. They've come in with a mandate. They know what their job is. They understand they're manipulated. They know they're being taught on spacecraft. They understand their connection to star beings and star nations. They know that some of them talk about coming through portals. Some of them talk about going through portals to other planets once they know their mathematical number. They're talking about seeing all sorts of different frequencies of beings and what have you, and interacting with them. They know when they're lied to. These are the children of today that are coming through and have been coming through. And our mandate is to nurture, support, and hear them, so that when their time comes, they can come and do the job they've come here to do. That's the reality. We can't escape that reality, because it's happening. It's happening now, and it's been happening and coming in with all these beautiful indigos, crystals, rainbows, golden children, all the different names that they're given. They've been coming in forever increasing numbers as we become more and more aware, and we can nurture and support them. So that's the reality. That's the truth of where we're going and what we need to be aware of. Our job is to be there for them.
100%. And to your point, Mary, and the souls who have agreed through soul contract to be the parents or the guardians of those children coming back, it's also important for them to get also the support, the understanding, the guidance, and releasing ourselves from fear, fearing other life, fearing what is different, what looks like differently, or who thinks differently from you. It's releasing all these invisible barriers that is there. And it's really much where we are, and we're shifting into. We are indeed the children of the light. All of us, we are the stewards of the light. We are the guardians of this planet. I want to just say hello to my husband, Peter Benson, who is there watching. Say hello to you, Mary, and then to you, Jeff. Peter says they are star seeds from all sources doing the work they need to do to align humanity with reascension. So it's for us, we are returning to that state of grace. We're returning to reclaiming our divine rights, our sovereignty, our memories, our gifts, our abilities. We are returning to remembering how we are branches of connections throughout a very, very complex and yet intelligence creation and sub branches of everything, whether we identify as a star nations, a celestial, an elemental, a humanoid, a light being, all of it, it's all interconnected.
Yes.
Wouldn't you say, Mary?
You said it beautifully,
Thank
Vivian,
you.
and absolutely. In that sense of the final wonderful thing is that we're all connected, that it is us and them. It's all of us being part of us and them. And that, I think, is for me the most wonderful thing of understanding consciousness, that it's not held in here. It's in a field and we're all part of it.
Exactly, exactly. And and again, in your experience, would you say at this point that the one person that can get the most in your way, it's your own. It's you. It's what you believe, what your mind dictate you that is true or false, or when we're holding on that this is I know the truth is here, and then this person saying that over here. Sometimes we get in our own way, and I'm sure the children must be talking about that.
I think the children are pretty tapped into their own truth and awareness because they've not had that being shrouded or covered up by programming and what have you. It's almost like they are fine up to about teenage years, and then they want to be like everybody else, so they shut it down for a while, or they go on to alcohol or drugs because they want to be the same. And then it's only later when they get past that peer pressure that they start to say, you know what, I was right all along. This is really what I want to be, and this is how I need to be. Sometimes they shut themselves down because they want to experience just being human. They want to see what it's like just to be human as well. So there's no right or wrong. Everyone's got their own journey with how they'll get to a point where they need to get to. Other people say, well, why was it till I got 40? I was 40 or 50. I'm saying because that was your sole choice to maybe experience more of the human side of things, to get to understand that. And I remember a walk-in lady who, beautiful, elegant, older lady who came to me and she said, I'm a walk-in. And I said, how do you understand that? And she said, well, she said, I was a being of light on a galactic ship. She said, we basically didn't have to eat. We absorbed food with our energy, and we were telepathic. And she said, and the next thing I found myself in a 3-year-old girl's body. And she said, it was very traumatic because I had to learn how to speak and I had to learn how to eat. And she said, and I go regularly up to my galactic family and debrief and tell them what it's like to be human. So, she called herself an undercover agent, really, of talking about reality. And there are many of them on this planet, I believe, that have come to be recorders of how it is down here so that they can explain that to various galactic communities to understand where we're actually at in our awareness. But the fact is that we're coming in many forms. We're coming in as, sometimes as hybrids, sometimes as walk-ins, and other forms as well. So there is such a variety of experience going on, which I think just because you're different doesn't make it wrong. It just means that you've got a special role and a special place, and nobody can tell you that there's something wrong with you just because you're experiencing life or you understand it differently to somebody else, because we're all aspects of a vast consciousness, and we're all choosing different things to experience. So your experience may not be mine, but it doesn't make it wrong, it just makes it different.
Okay,
Words of
I got
wisdom.
one final question for Mary before we go. Do these children that you talk to, do they interact with each other at times, or are they just solo?
Oh, some of them do. And I have a lovely little video of a young lady called Seven, and she's actually bringing in the light language. And a mother films her talking to another young woman, speaking light language to each other. They
Wow.
actually are having a conversation in light language. So, and I've heard this before, that there's, mind you, there are many forms of light language.
Mhm.
There are some that obviously are the same and are translatable. And I've actually seen others speak to each other in light language as well. So some of them, without doubt, can do that. And I've seen it, as I say, in a 7-year-old actually doing it on the phone with another young lady. So yes, it makes it quite compelling when you hear them speaking the language and then responding. You're hearing the response in the same language from someone else. It really is very compelling.
I like to hear that, just to hear that.
Yeah,
You
I've got
know,
the video somewhere. I can see if I can find it.
yeah, please. That would be. I would put that in my archive.
Okay.
Hi, and thank you for mentioning this, Mary. I have witnessed that before, where there's literally an exchange, and you can tell that the linguistic frequency is on a completely different level, and it's just a beautiful exchange, almost like a flow that coming through the two people, the child, the adult who's communicating, and it really creates such a beautiful flow of remembrance. It is very inspirational.
Is it the same language, or is it like different light languages?
No, it's the same. In fact, I've had a number speak different languages, different forms of light language. But the ones that were dialoguing were actually talking the same light language to each other. They understood each other with that light language. So there are many different forms, and some of them are not linear at all. Some of them are like codes or programs as well. So in other words, I was told that even one syllable or what have you can contain enough information to fill a room with encyclopedias.
Yeah.
And that's how it's like a kind of download rather than
Could
anything
a
else.
could a light language to us sound like whistling?
Oh yeah,
Like,
there's some clicking. The clicking ones actually can often be the mantis. I remember doing a regression with a beautiful lady who went very deep, and all she was doing ultimately was doing all this clicking language, talking to a mantis. And when she came out of it, she didn't remember anything. And I remember saying to her, "Don't you remember having a conversation with the clicking?" And she didn't believe me until she heard it herself. She didn't realize that she'd been having a communication with the mantis through the clicking sound. And we've got the Bushmen in the Kalahari that do the clicking sound. So I suspect they've connected to the mantis beings in South Africa, and they do the clicking, which is just like some of the mantis speaking as well. But she did it it was quite strange hearing having this conversation with all the clicking sounds, and she didn't want to believe it because it was so strange.
Yes, and it is. There's so many different variation of
Mm.
light language. And light language become eventually a frequency placeholder. And then you can, start to understand the form, and even some of them, many of them are holographic in nature. And just one last comment before we wrap up our absolutely phenomenal time together, again from David. It is also the reverse that the star beings, whether it is interdimensional beings or ultradimensional, or beings that comes from a complete different aspect of the multiverse or different plane of existence, they also come to learn from us, to feel what it is like to be in our proximity or be near us as of the earth human being, what it feels like to be in this physical form, to have those social interactions, how we are also human beings emanate this natural living aura, the energy of compassion, love, and all of it. So there is this spiritual, physical component of teaching each other, exchange, that is also brought in. And I think it's a good perspective to add as well, that there's a lot of exchange going on. Wouldn't you say, Mary?
I think we're all part of that. I often wonder why I'm looking at certain things, or researching certain things and thinking, I'm not doing this for me. It's going somewhere, you know. And I, one of the things, just to finish, one of the intuitive friends of mine, I had a little crystal skull that was an ET one, and she said, "That's you, Mary." She said, "You used to be one of them that was." She called it an anthropological ET. Studying other species, she said, and now you're studying the human species. And that kind of fit because of what I do, which is learning about people's experience. So I sort of felt that was okay. I can live with that.
I I love it. Absolutely. It is so, and again, a different spectrum, different mirrors of experience. We interchanging everything. So for everyone tuning in and watching also the replay, if you want to get in contact with Mary, whether it's her work, books, CDs, and so much more, all the links are in today's episode description. So we put everything, the links are all there. Just look at the description, look at the links. You can also, and we encourage you to explore. Mary, a very warm welcome and thank you again to you for coming here. And we are so grateful for your presence, for your time, for your dedication to not only the Star Nations, but also to humanity and this global planetary and even solar system reascension that we're in right now. We are historians in the making, and your contribution brings so much guidance, love, and upliftment for so many on the planet. So thank you so much. On behalf of my dear friend Jeff and I,
Yeah.
thank you for being with us.
Thank you,
Thank
Mary.
you. Thank you both. It's been a wonderful pleasure. And thank you for your presence and your wonderful insights as well. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Mm. It is absolutely lovely. And everyone, stay in your light. We're going to be back for another episode here on the Infinite Star Connection podcast. But for today, just embrace, feel, enjoy, and integrate the multi-layered of wisdom and this journey we just took on together. So stay in your light, everyone, and we will see you soon. Much love.